The way I've come to think about it is that it's not so much that they were under pressure as that they were living in a strange new kind of social vacuum created by the affluence and what we came to call the permissiveness of the 40s and the 50s. And that generation growing up through that period, the first post-war generation of young people, was being raised in, I'm talking about middle-class white kids. They were being raised in a period of affluence that was unprecedented. Affluence in a very special sense of the word that I think is no longer accessible to us, affluence with a capital A, meaning the sky's the limit, no environmental or ecological restraints, nobody could even spell the word ecology in those days, endless amounts of merchandise, no problems about waste or resources, energy, of that, anything of that sort, and a sense that there were careers available for everyone. The easy life was available to anyone who qualified, and qualifying was quite simple. You simply went to college, in many cases for free. I went to college for free, literally for free. And in that situation, there was an openness about childhood and about child rearing that was filled by a new idea. Dr. Spock's ideas about being permissive with your kids. You know, don't freak out if they rebel, if they talk back, if you catch them masturbating or something of that sort. Don't get hung up on it. This was a distinctly new way to be raised in the world, and it allowed for a whole generation that I suppose we would now call spoiled kids, which from another point of view simply meant kids who had very high expectations in life with respect to freedom and happiness. They thought life was about being free and about being happy. And they carried those expectations forward into high school and into college, and brought with them a kind of a level of expectation that was simply unprecedented in, I would say, in world history. You want to be careful about generalizing too widely. Because an enormous number of people coming up through the 40s and 50s simply took advantage of the opportunities to become what we called men in gray flannel suits, obedient wives raising kids in the suburbs. I mean, that was the general character of life through that period. However, there were others who would become a distinct but very obstreperous minority in the 60s when they arrived on the college campuses, who interpreted their position in the world as a chance to be assertive. The phrase they used from Emerson was to do your own thing, to take advantage of the freedom that was available to them on the assumption that you could never fall too far in affluent America. So that even if you dropped out, using the phrase that became prominent during that period, you couldn't drop too far. The society would somehow catch you and sustain you. And therefore, if you were not hung up on building a career and putting a lot of money aside, the opportunity to live a very free, creative life was possible to you. Now, it is that group of people that became a very interesting group in the 60s when they arrived on the college campuses, because they tended to be the people most willing, most prone to protest against any form of restriction, against anything that got in the way of their self-expression. They arrived at college under the assumption that college was for them, not for IBM or for the government or for the greater American economy. Eventually, social critics would call these people narcissistic in the sense that they were very self-centered. But from another point of view, what they were doing was taking advantage of a unique situation in world history, of an affluence that gave people the opportunity to ask deep questions. Who am I? What do I want? What do I really want in the world? What do I want independently of what my parents want, what my teachers want, what the government wants? Because what IBM and the corporations wanted was loyal employees, and what the government eventually wanted was obedient cannon fodder. Well, here were a group of kids who hadn't been raised to be obedient or docile or loyal, but had a strong sense of their own values and at least a sense that they could create their own identity in the world. These are the people who became the most difficult, resistant elements of the protest of the 60s. Now, I'm not talking about millions and millions of people. This is not a whole generation, but it's a very interesting segment of a generation that decided to claim the opportunity for freedom and happiness that was presented to them. Now, I take this as a very significant development of the post-World War II period in America and in other affluent societies. The desire of people to define themselves, to find their own identity in the world, on the assumption, on the basis that we can now afford to do this. We no longer have to be a society that has very few identities, and in which there is one very large identity where most people belong, called the masses. Nobody wants to be that anymore. People want to have a sense of, even if it's expressed in a trivial and bizarre way, they want to have a sense that they are their own. They are the captains of their own soul and masters of their own fate. And they may sometimes be deeply deluded about that, but the feeling is there, the need is there. And I take that to be a significant new plateau in cultural history. It certainly makes the world a much more interesting place when you have this grand variety of lifestyles, as we call them, before us.